We're going to culminate this particular data set analysis with a look at two names that are in the data set. We have the name Jew and variants of the name Jew, and then we also have a specific Bantu group name that is in the data set, and we're going to analyze this. Now, before we look at the presence of this name Jew in this data set, it's important to make note of the fact that the prevalence of this name Jew, J-E-W, is primarily found in Malaysia. Then you see it followed by Indonesia and India. The name Jew manifests in a number of ways in the data set. First, you see simply J-E-W as the total name. And then there are some instances where you see the name J-E-W as a part of another name. And so we're going to look at that. And so you see first off jeweler as the first name, and then you see Juwa. You also see several Ma-Ju down at the bottom. And you see all of these individuals coming from different places in terms of embarkation, but then ending up disembarking in Freetown. And again, in the data set, you see a number of individuals with the name Jew, whether it's Jew Su, Jew Ku. You see quite a variety there. You see them starting out in terms of embarking, coming out of Bonny, coming out of New Calabar, Cameroon River, going into Freetown. It's unclear why all of these individuals were a part of the transatlantic slave trade in this particular way during this time, but you see quite a few in terms of this name. Again, you see those Romance language names for the slave ships. Here you see additional manifestations of the name Jew. In this instance, you see simply J-E-W. You see that multiple times. You see individuals coming out of Lagos. You see individuals coming out of Freetown, going into Freetown. It's unclear why that dynamic is taking place, but you see it multiple times. What's also noteworthy is that when you see this prevalence of names, it appears that there was a selective process going on with respect to this transatlantic slave trade, particularly this late trade that was supposed to be going on. And the question is, why were certain groups being selected? You see this prevalence of names, and so there is some sort of cohesiveness going on here. But the question is, why were these individuals selected? And so, as you recall, there were numerous people with the Moor root to the name. And so now you have a Jew root to the name. And so again, you see Jusu, Jusa, Ojuku. You see just such a variety in terms of this name with this Jew root. You see a number of individuals coming out of Lagos, again, Cameroon, Bonny, and Bimbia going into Freetown. And then you see a little variation going on here with these ship names. And so you see more of an anglicized dynamic going on with respect to these ship names for this particular part of the data set. Again, you see multiple names with Jew as the root or the total name. You see individuals coming out of Cameroon, again, out of Lagos, out of Biafra, going into Freetown. Now the question is, what was going on, again, that these individuals were embarking in these particular places and then disembarking in Freetown? And here you see something that looks like you might have a little bit more British involvement in terms of the shipping dynamic. So you have these names in addition to the heavy prevalence of the Romance language ship names. And we did additional analysis with the different spelling with the J-O-O, because phonetically you would have the same thing going on here. And so when you phonetically just use J-O-O, you also have quite a large number of names. You have these individuals coming out of Lagos, Badagry, going into Freetown yet again. Again, this is in the 1800s. You have all of these names associated with Romance languages, again, for the ship names. So again, when you look at the totality of the circumstances, you see this heavy Portuguese presence again with respect to the transatlantic slave trade. And so, of course, by extension, you have this heavy Morisco and Marrano dynamic. You see where the individuals are purportedly embarking, and then you see this disembarking dynamic going on. Another name that is inside of the data set is a Bantu group name, and it's Mongo. So we're going to look at the manifestation of this name in the data set. Now, unlike some names that you see in the data set and then you see the prevalence somewhere that you would not expect it, with respect to Mongo, you see the prevalence where you would expect it. And so you see it is most prevalent in the Congo, the DRC, Mozambique, Cameroon, Tanzania, South Africa. Now, with respect to the Mongo forename, in some instances, you do not see an embarkation site. And so that is definitely noteworthy. Where are these people coming from? So they are suddenly appearing and then disembarking at Freetown. The question is how and why. So you see a number of Mongo names, Mongo rooted names, and then extensions. And so you see Mongo, Mongu, Mongali. You see quite a variety there. And for this Bantu group, you see some other odd dynamics. And so in one instance, you don't even see any embarkation. And so they just suddenly appear. In this instance, with respect to this portion of the data set, you see quite a bit of information in terms of embarkation, but then you see that odd dynamic of people suddenly appearing in Havana. And so you see the Mongo name over on the left-hand side. But in terms of the embarkation, you see quite a variety. You see West Central Africa, you see St. Helena, you see the Bight of Biafra. You also see them embarking Sierra Leone, port unspecified, and then appearing in Freetown. As we wrap this up, you see another oddity with respect to the people groups that were included in this late stage of the transatlantic slave trade. You see these individuals being used essentially to settle and colonize Sierra Leone. You also see these individuals integrated where they may not be genetically the same people, but they have been collectively placed in Sierra Leone as a cohesive entity. And what comes from this is, of course, you have identities that then become mixed. And the question is, was that the intention? It's unclear what the end game was with respect to taking all of these people to Sierra Leone, because it doesn't completely comport with the narrative about the purpose of Sierra Leone or even Liberia. What's also interesting is you do not see a high prevalence of Liberia in any of these data sets in terms of individuals being transported to Liberia along with this narrative. And so a number of questions emerge with respect to this entire dynamic. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care. See you soon.